This Snail by Nickolay Gurevich. Once upon a time there was a snail living on an old tree. He didn't remember whether he was born on the tree or had come from someplace else. But even if he had, it didn't really matter anymore, for he could not recall any other place nor traveling. Moreover, he had no desire to leave this old tree, which he found very comfortable. It provided all his needs, which was very modest to begin with. And if worse come to the worst, he could always hide in his shell and wait for the better times. If he felt like going for a walk, he would just move up and down the trunk, or from one branch to another. But that's what the extent of his travels. Everything else beyond his old tree looked suspicious and threatening to him. But though the snail lived alone on his tree, he never felt lonely. There was always different animals and birds passing by, and occasionally some would stop to say hello. And when they were not in a hurry going from here to there, or on seemingly very important business, they would spend some time with the snail telling him about their travels and adventures. As a matter of fact, as the time went by, they did it more and more often, for they found in the snails an exceptionally good and attentive listener. And not only that, they could count on the snail being always at the same place, making it unnecessary to look for him when one had an especially interesting story to tell. They also valued the fact, much appreciated by all tellers of tales, that the snail never told his own stories, for he thought he had none since he never went anywhere. So sometimes the eagle will alight on a branch next to the snail to tell him about faraway places he recently flew over, the high snow mountain, the blue lakes full of fish, the deep green valleys with white sheep grazing on the slope. He would tell the snail that he was such a great hunter that no prey would ever escape him. He would tell him that he, the eagle, was the biggest and the strongest of all birds. And the snail would listen in awe, feeling both humility and pride that such a magnificent hero find time to spend with such an insignificant creature as a mere snail. The next day an antelope might come to the tree in search of fresh grass, and noting the snail will tell him how many miles she often has to travel to find food to eat and water to drink, sometimes through the dry desert without a blade of grass or drop of water, another time crossing the river full of crocodiles. But she can run as fast as the wind, and no predator will ever catch her. Just the other day she easily escaped a pack of wolves and discovered a field of succulent grass on which she grazed at leisure to her heart's content. And hearing that, the snail was filled with sincerest admiration. Being extremely slow and clumsy himself, he could fully appreciate someone else's speed and agility. Occasionally, a jaguar would climb the tree, sometimes dragging his skill to hide in the branches, oftentimes just to rest. He that would complain to the snail about the prey that got away that day, and how tired and hungry he often was, having to work so hard to fill his stomach. And though the snail couldn't relate to jaguar travails, for he easily couldn't find something to eat on a tree without any effort, and was never hungry or tired, he nevertheless nodded in sympathy, feeling truly sorry for poor jaguar. But complaints was rare. Most of the tales he heard were of triumph and glory. And so it went day after day, month after month, year after year. The snail will always be on the old tree, greeting warmly the passers-by, always ready to lend his ear to their exciting story of wonderful exploits and heroic deeds, yet being himself more or less content with his uneventful life. His friend would talk, he would listen, occasionally asking a polite question, never doubting the veracity of details, a perfect listener. Sometimes he would even offer an advice, though it was never heeded, for both sides knew that he, as someone completely ignorant about the world beyond his old tree, was hardly qualified to give any useful advice, especially to such a seasoned traveler adventurers as his friends were. For while his friends clearly enjoyed having someone like him to be always ready and willing to hear about their struggle and glories, victories and defeats, successes and failures, they also gradually started to feel guilty for using him. And so, to assuage their guilt, they begin telling the snail that he should start traveling as well, to learn more about the world. Thus, after telling him as usual about their latest adventure, they would urge him to embark on one of his own. They would tell him that the world was full of exciting and wonderful things, and that he really had nothing to worry about going there. "You should be more adventurous," the eagle would say. "You don't even know how much you are missing. Life is short. One day you are here, the next you are gone," the antelope will repeat again and again. "One has to live it to the fullest. Seize the day," echoed Jaguar. "Nothing in life can be compared to the glory of victory, to the joys of victory," and so on and so forth. And they talked like this every time they came to see the snail, for in truth they did feel sorry for him for not having been anywhere, not seeing anything beyond his old tree. And the snail himself, the more he listened to his friends, urging, the more he began to doubt the wisdom of leading such a protective, cautious, and let's face it, rather uneventful and boring life. And the more he expressed such doubts, the more forcefully his friends would exhort him to plunge into the wide world. And the more they insisted, the more he was inclined to do just that. Then one day, driven by curiosity, and not in a small measure but desire to please his friends, and also about prospects of being able to tell them about his adventure, as they always told him, the snail finally overcame his reluctance and fear of the unknown and decided to go. Slowly, for he was a snail after all, he climbed down the tree. And then also slowly he began crossing the road. But alas, he had chosen the most inauspicious time for his first foray into exciting life of adventurer. For just as he reached the middle of the road, a herd of elephants were moving along it. The elephants were so huge that they couldn't see a tiny snail crossing the road, and one of them inadvertently stepped on a snail and instantly crushed him to death. His sudden death was a great shock to his friends. They lamented it intensely and for a long time. They now realized how irreplaceable he was as a friend and how deeply they were attached to him. They knew that they will never find another one so willing to be absorbed with their lives, to full exclusion of his own, someone who would listen with such a great attention to their stories, who would share their joys and sorrows, who would laugh when they laugh and cry when they cry, one who made them feel really interesting and important. And without that, their own life became much less meaningful. They missed him very much. They were also wrecked with the guilt of feeling responsible for his death, for encouraging someone so inexperienced to go into the outside world and to be crushed so quickly. If only they could turn the clock back. Why hadn't just left him alone to live a life he was so comfortable with? Why did they urge one so innocent, so fragile to risk his life? And for what? Their grief, their remorse was profound and sincere, and they begin to question the value of their own lives as well. Was it really so full of excitement as they imagined? Were they too egotistical, too full of themselves to see anything else? Was the snail right to live a life he did? Was he wrong? What was the right life? Does anybody have a choice? Was it the right question? They didn't know the answers and had no one to turn to. All they knew for certain was that their dearest friends, the only loyal friends they ever had, is dead. And if death teaches one anything, it is about what one values the most. They truly missed him.